The Nintendo Switch 2 is a console that has garnered a lot of attention since its reveal trailer back in January and its own Nintendo Direct on April 2nd. Many people were impressed with the Switch 2's hardware capabilities as well as some of its more interesting features.
If you open the chat menu and turn on game screen sharing,
Good job. There we go.
you can also share your game screen.
But in any case, the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct showed off the hardware capabilities of the system, with some games running in either a performance mode of 1080p and 120 frames per second, or a quality mode of 4K and 60 frames per second. And these games look absolutely beautiful. I mean, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond was pretty impressive in the Nintendo Switch Direct, but seeing how gorgeous it looked in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct had me drooling and itching to play the game. And of course, the reveal of third-party support and first-party games were enough to bring hope to a lot of people.
Dude! Wait, hold on! What?
What on earth? What is that?
You can eat a hamburger! Oh!
What? Oh no. Guys, I can't do this.
Joined hands with the Hylians.
I can't do this. I can't.
Their union led to a great and prosperous kingdom.
Oh, I'm sick.
In time,
We were all incredibly excited to see what playing this console would be like and the endless possibilities Nintendo could explore. At least right before the price information got revealed. And in addition to absurdly high game prices, pre-orders have been delayed in the US and will possibly increase in price due to our, situation. But all that aside, I've been itching to see what the Nintendo Switch 2 could do and what playing its games would be like. Right after the January reveal video, Nintendo announced that it would be holding a select number of Switch 2 live experiences around the world, where people would be able to try out the new system and its games. I had some trouble getting a ticket at first. But eventually, after a dark week of waiting, I finally got confirmation that my tickets were winners and I would be going to the one in Los Angeles. Yippee! Nintendo, I am inside of you. After checking into the event, we were given lanyards that had 6 empty stamp card spaces. And every time we played a game, we would get a mark on our stamp card, and after filling out every single space, we would get some sweet Nintendo merchandise. In the first room, we got to see and hold the Nintendo Switch 2 and some of its accessories. I, for one, am a really big fan of the magnetic Joy-Cons. They don't fall off or slide off as easily as the Switches, and they're nice and firm. I had a lot of fun just clicking the Joy-Cons back into the system a lot. After everyone was done checking out the consoles, we were all paired up and then taken to the Mario Kart World Tour practice area. Here, my friend and I started the game on the big screen together as we discovered all of the possible characters, costumes, and kart combinations the new game had to offer. We did a few rounds on the big screen and a round in handheld mode. The Nintendo Switch 2 felt really nice in my hands, and even as someone with small hands, I could still comfortably hold the system and reach the Joy-Cons and all its buttons without straining too much. After we had our fun in the tutorial area, it was time to move on to the ultimate challenge, a 24 vs 24 knockout tour. Moving into the next room, everyone was assigned a station with their own TV and a Pro Controller, and we spent a few minutes just free roaming before it was time to race against each other. I really enjoyed the amount of paths you could take to get ahead of everyone, and most of the race there were these big clumps of players, and we got caught in those, all hell broke loose. First, someone would throw a bomb, and then a lightning strike would stall everyone, and then to only make matters worse, a blue shell was coming in hot to first place, and at least 4 or 5 other people would be caught in the crossfire. I also really appreciate that some of the items have text on screen for when they're initiated. For example, when a blue shell explosion goes off, there would be a blue color text above the explosion with the word kaboom in bold and outlined. This helps make it easier to avoid explosion sites or swoop in and grab some coins, but also make it not too easy to see where an explosion would occur. In the end, I got wiped out at 10th place, but my friend was able to make it to the final round and finished in 4th place. After our fun little knockout tour, it was time to go to the main event, the Free Play Zone. The Free Play Zone had demos of Donkey Kong Bonanza, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo Classics GameCube, the Switch 2 edition of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, Split Fiction, Ancient Civilization 7, Drag X Drive, Hades 2, Street Fighter 6, Mario Party Jamboree's mouse and camera minigames, Cyberpunk 2077, and Yakuza 0. Our free play time was limited to an hour, so we had to decide which games were must-plays, which games could fill out our stamp card, and which games we were willing to skip out on. Just by looking at the stations, we had to eliminate Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, Street Fighter 6, Yakuza 0, and Cyberpunk 2077. Each of these stations only had 2 or 3 TVs, and the lines for each were long when we first got there. Also, side note, it was really funny to me that Cyberpunk and Yakuza had to have their own secluded room to prevent, or at least make it easy to spot if kids were heading into that room. The first game we decided to stop at was Donkey Kong Bonanza, just to our right. Donkey Kong Bonanza unfortunately didn't count for a stamp, but it was one of the biggest free play stations, so we quickly found a TV that we could each play at. Overall, I really enjoyed Bonanza. The cutscenes and models for Donkey Kong and all the NPCs looked really sharp, and the frames did not stutter at all. Also, it was just incredibly fun to start smashing through the overworld and try to uncover as much gold as possible. It was a neat little experience, and even though I'm not the #1 3D platformer fan, I still very much enjoyed Bonanza. What made me giggle a bit was the booth employee next to me who kept reassuring another player that the purple rock on Donkey Kong's shoulder didn't have much to do in the tutorial, and eventually we'd find out more about them in the full game. If you've seen the Korean key art of Donkey Kong Bonanza, you'll probably understand why they said what they said. Trying to find our next game after that was a bit difficult due to the growing lines, but ultimately we landed on Split Fiction. Here we finally got our first stamp filled out and we got to try out the game. The game stuttered a little bit when we first started, but after that it held a consistent frame rate. I had never played It Takes Two before this, so a co-op puzzle game like this was an entirely new experience for me. It took my friend and I a while to get used to each of our characters' abilities, but we got it down eventually. I would often die a lot because of poor timing on platforming sections, or because I left before I looked. Together, my friend and I solved a few puzzles, got past the combat area, and just as our environment changed from sci-fi to fantasy, our play session was out of time. Just behind us was the wall of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, so we decided to give that a go next. At these stations, there was actually a large mouse pad on a little standing desk so that you could control Samus with one Joy-Con in hand and another in mouse mode for aiming. I will admit using a mouse Joy-Con took me a while to get used to, but after defeating a few enemies, I started to get the hang of it. It's a really cool way to control Samus, and it feels smoother than using a joystick or just gyro to control aiming and shooting. It really helps with the immersion, and I can almost picture myself moving Samus's right arm gun as I slide the mouse Joy-Con across the table. All of the Metroid stations were set to performance mode, and it made the play experience so much better. I've never played a game, aside from maybe Clone Hero a few times, that required more than 60 frames per second, and so being able to play Metroid Prime 4 at 120 frames was a visual treat. I honestly think this was my favorite station to play at because of how fun it was to play a Metroid Prime game and being able to see the graphics capabilities of the Switch 2. Playing the demo definitely convinced me from skipping out on Metroid Prime 4 at launch to using a portion of my tax return to buy the game. We only had about 30 minutes left in our playtime, so we decided to walk around a bit when we saw that Hades 2 had a pretty short line and thought, why don't we give it a try? My friend and I both had played Hades to some degree, and I've only gone as far as the first stage in the fight against Hades, but my friend has beaten Hades at least 2 times. As soon as it was our turn, we were given our 3rd mark on our stamp cards and began Princess Melinoa's quest to defeating Kronos. Hades 2 was extremely smooth on Switch 2, and I had a lot of fun playing through the levels. I didn't buy the game on early access on Steam, so this was my first time seeing the new enemies, figuring out Melinoa's abilities, and seeing all the new characters and their designs. I kept dashing and sprinting and killing enemies, and despite my best efforts, I never made it past the 5th level of the dungeon. However, my friend actually made it to the first boss and managed to defeat her on his 2nd run in the demo. I'm definitely excited to see what Hades 2 will look like once it comes out, and it definitely looks great on a Nintendo Switch 2. After Hades 2, we tried walking around a bit to see what stations were open. I initially wanted to see the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 editions, but by the time I got there was a small line forming and the game didn't count for a stamp. So with a greater time crunch than ever, we decided to aim for the games that had the shortest play times and made our way over to our 4th game. Mario Party Jamboree actually had 2 types of areas, one where you could play the Joy-Con mouse minigames, and another where you could play the Nintendo Switch 2 camera minigames. We opted for the mouse Joy-Con games since there was a shorter line for those stations, and it was right behind the Hades 2 station. The booth employee helped us get one more person to play with us, and stepped in as a fourth person so that we could play right away. We got to try the pull back car minigame, the stacking push minigame, air hockey, and the Toad electric escape minigame. Each of them were incredibly fun, and we ended up reaching a tie on the car minigame and air hockey. Air hockey was probably the most chaotic though, because we started with one green shell as our puck, but in the last 15 seconds of the minigame, Koopa Troopas started appearing en masse, and all of a sudden there were at least 8 green shells flying back and forth between both teams. After filling out our forest stamp spot, we decided to hurry over to the Nintendo Classics GameCube section for some fast and easy gameplay. When we arrived at the booth, we received a mark on our 5th badge slot, and we were given the new GameCube controllers to try out. Right off the bat, I really enjoyed how the controller felt in my hands. I own the Power Ace Switch GameCube wired controller, and I mainly use it for some GameCube games on a system, and on my Switch for Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door and Super Mario 3D All-Stars. My only complaint is that the controller is that it's extremely light and the plastic on it feels a little bit cheap, but overall it still works well. But the new Nintendo Classics controller had a comfortable weight to it, and the shell on it didn't feel nearly as cheap as the Power 8 one. Once we got situated with our controllers, we had an option of 4 games to choose from: The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, Soul Calibur 2, and Super Mario Strikers. The booth employee informed us that although we could play Super Mario Strikers, it wouldn't be available at the launch of the Switch 2, and would instead be added at a later date. We decided to go for a few rounds of Soul Calibur 2, and it looked really good. When we first loaded the game, the booth employee guided us to the graphics settings and showed us that we could change the aspect ratio from the original 4:3 to 16:9. Instantly, I was impressed how even in widescreen, none of the assets, characters, or stages looked stretched. Everything looked amazing. We had a good few rounds and kept trading wins back and forth, and before we knew it, our demo was over and we had to move on to our last game right before our free play session was over. By this point, we had been standing in lines while playing for our entire free play session, and we wanted to play a low stress and relaxing game to end the day. After some wandering, we found the Drag X Drive demo and decided to play it. Totally not because it was the only game station with seats. We had to wait a bit for the group before us to finish up, but as soon as they were done, we sat down and got right into the first tutorial. First, we were given basic things to learn, like turning, going forward and backward, and how to brake. Overall, the motion of dragging the Joy-Cons wasn't too bad. The game encourages you to do slow and long drags instead of fast and harsh drags. Even with that mechanic though, I can't imagine playing this game on any surface other than a mousepad. It's probably just a sensory thing for me, but just the sensation of the raw Joy-Con strap scratching along a hard surface sends bad chills down my spine. Once everyone had finished the tutorial, we were then set to play our match. Everyone was having difficulty making it from one side of the court to the other, and most of the match was just a game of defense and one player who would make it from one side of the court to the other to help score a point. I mainly helped with defense and passed the ball to my teammates, because if too many of us were chasing after the ball, the enemy team would have a chance to snatch the ball from us when we collided. It was a pretty steady game for a while where one team would score a 2-pointer and the other team would do the same. Eventually we were able to break the cycle and someone on my team scored a 3-pointer, putting us 5 points ahead of the opposing team. But that immediately went to our heads and the enemy team scored another 4 points when we weren't looking. Just as they got possession of the ball and started moving to the other side of the court to score their winning point, time ran out for the match and my team was victorious. Drag X Drive was an interesting game, but definitely not one that I'm going to spend more than $15 on. The controls took a little bit of getting used to, but it's not totally unplayable. That said, it is very obvious though that this is more of a tech demo of the system and its capabilities more than an actual game. Now that we got our stamp card entirely filled out, it was time to claim our prize and leave the event. We got a neat little backpack that I will most definitely use to carry my consoles. I was fully expecting a pin or a plastic doohickey of some kind, but this backpack is something I'll definitely get use out of. But that's not all. I actually brought my 3DS and managed to get 7 whole street passes. Really glad that people were still walking around with their 3DSs. The question now is, will I buy the Switch 2 at launch? Honestly, probably not. I personally want to hold off on purchasing the system until an OLED or a Zelda edition comes around. And honestly, I'm also a little worried about the possibility of an exponentially high Switch 2 launch price in the US, thanks to the man in the White House and his billionaire goons who can't stop carelessly throwing tariffs around left and right. I mean, unless of course my tax return suddenly gives me $450 more than what I originally expected when I filed. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I honestly did have a blast at the event and can't wait to see what the Nintendo Switch 2 brings. But I do still have my reservations on the price of the games and the possibility of the console price increasing from what it currently is. Let me know what your thoughts are and if you were able to attend an event like this from Nintendo down in the comments below. Also be sure to check out my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Nendarian. I usually stream some games when I'm free and do live reactions to any Nintendo news there. Until then, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.